Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another episode. Welcome, Ashley. Good to see you.
Hi. Good to see you too. It's been kind of a crazy week around here. How's yours been?
Yeah, same. I'm kind of brain dead right now, if you can't tell.
And listeners, so you know, right before this, Yang was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go shave real quick, and then we can get on the podcast."
Dude, it's been a while since I got a haircut too, so
I can't tell though. You're always pretty clean cut though.
yeah, I try, but it's been a little while. My wife is like, "Can you go get a haircut with my son? Can you guys go
Yeah,
get a
that's. I
haircut?"
was just having this same conversation with my husband. They're both like really ridiculously overgrown right now, and I was like, "Just make an appointment for Saturday."
Yeah,
The thing they like go together. I was
yeah.
just shocked at how fast you shaved. I was like, "Wait, that was like less than 10 minutes."
Well, I don't have a whole lot of hair, it's
Yeah,
just
yeah, you just gotta,
easier to
like,
get it. Yeah.
clean it up. That's funny.
Yeah, but I'm going on vacation at the end of the month, so I'm trying to time it because I don't want to like have to get
Yeah.
another haircut right before. So I'm like, I'll just
Where
wait
y'all
a couple
going?
weeks. We're going on a cruise.
Oh god.
I
Don't
know.
get whatever that, like, rat virus is that's happening. Have you seen that in the news?
No, but why are you
See,
telling me
there's
this right before I'm
there's
going,
a
dude? You're
whole
gonna
cruise ship that's, like, being quarantined right now for some, like, crazy, like I can't remember the name of it, but it's, like, some crazy, like, virus. It's even worse than coronavirus.
Oh
Apparently,
my
it's,
gosh.
what do you call it? Like, respiratory, like based, and 3 people have died on this
Oh my
cruise.
gosh. I'm gonna have to
2
look
have
this
been,
up.
like, evacuated, and there's 7 cases or something. I mean, I
Dude.
don't know what cruise line it is. I'm sure it's like I mean, if there's some it's rat urine is how you get this disorder, and so I was like, "Okay, well, why are there rats on the ship?" First of all,
It's-
is it
All,
a
all
dirty
ships all ships probably have rats, right?
I don't
They're
know. I mean, if
everywhere.
it's
I
in,
don't
like
know.
you would
Like,
think, like, between each disembarkment, like, they would, you know,
yeah,
exterminate,
they would
clean,
clean.
whatever, so I
Yeah.
don't know. Anyway, what cruise are you going on?
Dude, my wife is our this is our first
I
cruise
don't do
ever.
cruises because 'cause I'm
Yeah, yeah,
terrified of them.
so I've never been, but we're going on a Disney cruise because
Disney, you'll probably be fine.
we had a bunch of friends and they're like,
Oh,
"Oh,
everybody raves
it's
about it. Yeah.
yeah, it's great." So then we're like, "All right, we'll go too." We have a couple friends that are going with us as well,
Yeah.
but,
Just don't tell Tina the story about the virus.
well, she's gonna watch this later and be like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" Maybe we'll delay this episode till after the cruise or
But tell
something.
her not to watch this episode.
Oh my gosh. She's already, like,
Well,
thinking
she
about, like,
might see the news,
Titanic.
though. It's, like,
Y
on the news. It was, like, one of
Okay.
the first things that popped up on my news this morning.
Well, now it's gonna be in my algorithm.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
gonna show
sorry.
up.
Sorry.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, thanks.
Anyway,
Thanks,
yeah, I mean,
Ashley.
I've heard good things about Disney, though. Y'all should be fine. Like, we thought about it too because I've heard, like, Disney is actually easier than, like, going to Disney World. Like, the cruises are more like, you get the experience of all the characters and all that stuff, but without all the craziness.
Yeah. Yeah, without all the crazy walking, yeah.
Yeah.
But my son loves the coasters. He loves the
Likes
rides.
the rides, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. We may end up stopping by and doing a couple days at Disney World too, maybe. I don't know. We'll
Oh,
see.
you're
We'll
flying
see
out
how
I
it
mean,
goes.
you're like, the ship is out of Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are better. The ones out of Galveston, I feel like I mean, the cruise ships are still fine, but the destinations are like
Yeah. Well, it's like the smaller ships, right?
right,
The bigger ones go out of Florida.
right. Anyway,
Anyways, yeah.
yeah, so we're, May-cember over here, like, all the into school stuff, so it's been just, like, one thing after another this week. It's just I'm ready for
Yeah.
summer,
We're
slower
trying to
mornings.
get all this content out before craziness at home.
Whining.
So speaking of, we've been accumulating a couple listener questions. So we thought that today would be a good time to answer those questions that we have. So today is a special episode where we're going to cover and answer all of your questions. You ready, Ashley?
Yep, I'm bring 'em on.
All right. So let's start with the first one. All right. So, how does an employee deal with a supervisor who's a little bit more
Sorry,
introverted or
silent.
disengaged? Turn off your phone. And who refuses to coordinate any team building activities? So, their leadership has approved team building across the board, and other teams have gone, but theirs consistently just is not doing anything, essentially.
Right.
She wrote this whole thing, but
But
how
essentially
do
the
they
manager just doesn't it's not necessarily probably that the manager doesn't support it, but maybe that they don't plan anything. There's no action behind it is what it sounds like.
yeah, it could be maybe they're just super busy or something and they
Well,
don't
also,
wanna do it or burnt out or checked out,
one
who
thing that
knows?
stood out to me too is that the listener says, the supervisor's introverted, right? So in the clinical sense of introversion, like that means that somebody is just more reserved or shy or doesn't like crowds or things of that nature, right? But I also think like, looking at somebody being introverted versus extroverted, we look at all these different assessments that companies do, right, about
Mhm,
personality and things. I think introversion could also be like a perception, right? Maybe they're
mhm,
perceiving that manager is introverted, but they aren't necessarily. Maybe they're just, like you said, busy and just haven't really made it a priority. So I think start with, hey, maybe it's just, don't assume, anything about the manager, right? But I think the approach that you should take is maybe present it as a business-based solution. So like maybe they don't want to go like ride go-karts at the, racetrack or something, but maybe other things that like where I don't know, business can coordinate or collaborate with that activity. So, like a lunch, but that accomplishes something. Because maybe that manager would feel like, well, if we got some work done too, I might feel better about all of us being like out of the office. So, that might be one approach that they could use. And then I would also say, like, bringing up consistency throughout the company versus equality, right? Because if you frame something like they're getting something we're not getting, that can come across like you're pouting or whatever. But if you bring it to them as, hey, we see these other teams consistently like participating in these activities and our team isn't. Is there a reason why? Like kind of come at it from an inquisitive standpoint rather than an accusatory one in the beginning and just kind
mhm.
of feel out like what that manager is thinking or why that has been something that hasn't been on their radar. If you don't feel comfortable like approaching the manager, I would say, look at it from a systemic standpoint where it's like, okay, if this is something that is widely known that the company does or leadership supports, is there accountability around it? In other words, like ask leadership, right? Like ask HR, ask leadership, like if this is a culture thing, like is it something that managers, it sounds like they may just kind of leave it to manager discretion to organize, but they expect it to happen. Right. So if it's not happening, then that maybe needs to be brought to the attention that that's something that, that manager, but you have to do that delicately too, because it's not like you want to throw your manager under the bus. Um,
Yeah,
I would say the last resort is to circumvent the manager. Like I would
yeah,
try to have a conversation, but I think you also have to have team buy-in for that. Like if that's how you feel as an individual, does the rest of the team feel that way? If so, then maybe that's something that needs to be brought collectively as the team, you know?
yeah, yeah, sounds good. So now I'm gonna kind of talk about the flip side is as a leader, when you don't do that, you get listener questions like this, and
Mhm.
then and you get disengaged employees, because
Yeah.
they're gonna start to tune out. They're not gonna feel appreciated. They're gonna feel
Morale can drop. Yeah.
exactly, right? Especially if you see everybody else doing it and you're the only team that's not, right?
Yeah.
That's how you slowly lose people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I mean, and again, unfortunately, not every organization has strong leadership or strong HR, but if they do, or if it's a large enough organization to have those key players in place, then that should be part of what you're training managers on, right? Train
Yeah,
managers to be more conscientious of the team building efforts and communication and things like that. And, I think that there's things that managers can do to recognize their team or to keep those lines of communication open that aren't necessarily, like some crazy event. you know? I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, like that introverted line, I have a bunch of introverted friends that still like to go out to lunch or, happy hour sometimes. Like they don't have to stay long, right? Because sometimes they get
yeah.
burnt out, right? Or you don't have to do anything crazy, but yeah, like even like a team lunch, that could be something minor.
I think you can also ask permission. I mean, if that person's too busy or it is a personality thing, they just don't like to attend it, ask them if they're okay with a self-organized event. As long as
Yeah.
it's approved and sanctioned by the manager, like,
Yep.
can we all go do this thing, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And if the manager's checked out and they don't feel like going, they don't have to go.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. All right. So next one's a little bit tougher question. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. So, how can an employee handle sexual harassment when they don't trust their HR team to address it properly? What steps can they take? And where can they turn to outside of the company, maybe, if the issue is not handled appropriately?
Okay. Well, I mean, obviously my first answer is going to be like, talk to HR. I mean, for sure, right?
Yeah.
But if you get the feeling like HR is not one, timeliness is a key indicator in these kind of things. If HR is taking it seriously, they're going to act accordingly quickly. So they're going to say, okay, let me start an investigation like right away, right? They should lay out for you what that means and how confidentiality is handled and ask you things like what do you want the outcome to be? Because I do that all the time when I investigate. I'll say, "Hey, so, I mean, clearly you want the behavior to stop would be like number one. But then I've had people that are like, I don't want to work with that person anymore. I don't like, let's say they're on the same team or something. So then you have to figure out like, is that even a viable option for the company? Not that you're not trying to protect the employee, right? But is that a viable option to move teams or, I mean, and last resort is firing unless you find something that like, if you find that that person was harassing, you got to go through how egregious is the harassment? Is it a terminable offense? But I normally tell people like prior to any of that knowledge, termination may not we not that may not be an option based on what we find. But we will do our best to try to accommodate things that make you feel comfortable, right? Like that's the goal. So, but if you get any inclination during that conversation that HR is just like kind of brushing it off, number one, whether HR is involved or not, document. But when you document, and that's things from text messages, things that you are tangible if you can. I mean, try to avoid hearsay, right? Like he said this and then I said this. Like if there's witnesses, can those witnesses corroborate it? And if there's text messages, there's emails, like save those things or compile those things. Keep your notes factual, right? Keep your feelings out of it. Just stick to the facts. But I would say that those things are something you should be doing for yourself, regardless of HR's involvement. Um, and then try to avoid like anything that would make you be seen as retaliatory. It's a hard word. Sorry.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, like while the investigation is going on or while you're considering your options or compiling documentation, make sure you're not like doing something back to that person. Just try to kind of like keep things status quo if you can. But I mean, really, like if HR or the company you just don't feel like one, they're like handling it in your best interest, or let's say they do all that and then the outcome is, they cite, let's say it's a senior person. It could be a manager, right? And they're like, well, we're just going to protect the manager. We're not getting rid of them. That person's been here for 20 years, whatever. Then there are regulatory agencies outside of the company that you can seek. EEOC being one of them. That'd be probably where I'd start. State labor agencies, right? NLRB, like labor boards. And then of course an employment attorney. You need to get them involved. And then in some cases professional licensing boards, right? Like if you worked in a hospital and it was a doctor, you could get their medical license examined and then that person could investigate. So there are options,
Yeah.
outside the company.
So for the record, we are just HR people. We're not
We're
legal
not lawyers.
professionals.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're not legal professionals or lawyers. So if it is something serious, yeah, definitely seek counsel on this, right? But the examples that Ashley gave is just from a HR perspective, how a good HR person should handle it. Any kind of claim is always should be taken seriously, right?
Well, first and foremost, if it's something that you feel like you're in danger, like someone's stalking you, there's been any kind of physical, like, get law enforcement involved.
Oh
Like,
yeah. Yeah,
I
for sure.
mean, yeah, because I actually had a situation where we did an investigation, and after meeting with the employee and hearing like her side of the story, I was like, there is something, there could have been potential criminal activity in what she told me. And I specifically in that meeting said, if what you're saying is true, I would probably seek law enforcement advice as well, like a
Yeah.
restraining order.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's scary. Yeah. Yeah, but in general, like if you feel like you can't trust HR, the company's against you, then yeah, kind of like what Ashley said, you have to trust your gut. And if you feel unsafe, seek the outside counsel and then leave. Find
Yeah.
it for,
Well,
find it's not a job is not worth your safety or your mental
right.
health or your livelihood. So yeah.
Well, and I've also seen people, it's not easy to do, but I've seen it happen where people will initiate a claim, even with the EEOC, while they still work at the company. And so it becomes the company's job even more so to protect that employee during that time. Because the other thing is, an employee shouldn't be expected to leave a job where they have income to go be unemployed and have no income because
Yeah.
you're being harassed, right? So if you initiate a claim, the company cannot fire you for
Mm,
initiating that claim. Now, companies have been known to get creative and they'll oust you after it all dies down somehow. They'll find a performance issue or something, right?
hmm.
However, during the duration of the claim, they cannot oust you. So, that being said, you know, you're protected to an extent during that time. Yang mentioned that somebody could like leave their job or just leave if they were, safety first. But I would say that I have dealt with claims in the past where the person has stayed employed while they're going through, whether it's internal claim like through HR or like an EEOC case, because, why leave your job and income and all that? You're the one that has a grievance, right? So that's not fair to you. But not to say that companies haven't found ways to oust someone after
Yeah.
it all dies. Like if the claim gets resolved or dies down or whatever, they think, you could be seen as kind of like a whistleblower
Like
problematic. I mean,
troublemaker. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and there's protections for that, right? Like whistleblower protections and things. But I would say, like, if you don't have an option to leave your job, it's just financially risky to do that. You can stay during that time. And then the company has like real obligations. Like they could face severe penalties if they retaliate against you for that during that time. So it's not comfortable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It is difficult during that time to do that, but people have done it. I've seen it done. What some people have done though, if it's in the case of like a sexual harassment, is they'll actually ask to go, if their position allows it, obviously, but they'll ask to go work from home during the duration
Mm,
of that
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that they're not at work with that person.
With that part, yeah, and then it'll be super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Or they could make their life worse,
Right.
like
Right.
yeah.
So then, that resolves an issue for the company and for the employee, like to feel protected and the company to make sure nothing else happens during that time. And then, it's a more comfortable environment for the employee that time.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. And then my advice as a recruiter is like find a new job. It's always like get out of there. You can't trust, if you can't trust
Yeah.
HR, who's supposed to be like, your internal champion almost, like, man, that's not a good place.
I think I've talked about it before on the podcast, right? But I think the scary thing about being in-house HR for both JAR employees, like I used to be, and for employees who want to look to HR for that security and that trust, is that at the end of the day, you have to remember HR is an employee too, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So they like, of course, a good HR person will consider the employee first, right? Like, can
Mhm,
an accommodation be made? Are we making sure we're like, hearing them and taking steps and all those things? But at the end of the day, sometimes what people have to remember is that HR isn't the decision maker. And so let's say the decision comes down from management to handle that investigate. So what HR's job is to do is to collect all the information and give a recommendation to management, right? We should fire this person or we should send them to training or whatever based on the findings. But let's say management's like, we're not doing any of that, right? So then
mhm,
HR has to be the messenger to go back to the employee to say, okay, we did the investigation. Here's what we found. This is what we're doing or not doing. And then that's where the distrust comes from.
mhm.
I think you have to remember HR isn't always that decision maker, and HR can't necessarily or doesn't always go against management because their job's on the line too. Like it's hard for HR because HR doesn't have HR, right?
Yeah, I've
Anybody they can go to either. It's very tricky.
so I've seen like especially in the corporate ladder, some of the HR people that get promoted faster are the yes men,
Yeah.
right? The ones that don't
That
challenge
agree with the
management.
company.
Yeah, just anything management says, they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we can do that." "Oh yes, we'll do it that way," even if
Yeah.
it's right or wrong, right? Those are the people that because they're in favor, in good standing with management, the
Yeah.
ones that decide who gets promoted, right?
And the problem was I was never that person.
Yeah,
I was
that's why
always
that's why you're
that's why I do
me.
consulting now because I was that battle with these leaders all the time. I felt like trying to do the right thing for employees or trying. So now on the consulting side, I mean, I still leave the decision up to the executives and it's their company. They can, my job now is to point out the liabilities, right?
Yeah,
Like this is the liability if you do
but
that.
the benefit now is if you have a client that's non-ethical, you can just choose
I
not
just
to
walk
work with them.
away.
Yeah, yeah, and only work with.
I don't think I can, I can have you as a client.
Yeah,
I don't agree with
exactly.
the way that you're treating your employees or handling the situation or what. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the same way with me. Like, I'm not gonna work with companies that I know it has a revolving door. Like, why would I place one of my candidates there
Mhm.
when, 6 months from now they're
Or
gonna be.
unethical hiring practices or something. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, so that kinda segues, us into our next question, which is about ageism. So ageism seems to be a hot topic lately. How can a job candidate professionally address an interviewer who keeps making references to their age or asking age-specific questions? And on the flip side, how should companies be training their supervisors to recognize and eliminate generational bias when it comes to hiring and managing both younger and older employees?
It's a good question. You
Yeah.
wanna take the
So,
hiring part, and then I can comment on the training?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So I'm just kind of go with the assumption that, well, it could be younger or older, but I have seen it a lot with the older candidates lately. Well, just historically, and then just lately been seeing it a lot more with like younger candidates as well. Kind of on a side note, I wanted to talk about like AI and how that's going to affect the younger generation because that's going to be a big problem. But for the ageism question, yeah, there's certain interview questions that I advise my clients not to ask because it can come across in the wrong way, even if you don't have that intention. Right. As a parent, I see it come across like asking about kids, for example. This isn't like an ageism thing, but this is kind of like a bias and like ruling people out thing. I kind of put it all in the same bucket. But like when you ask parents about or a candidate about like their kids, for example. And you and I have talked about this. It starts off harmless where they show up in the office, they see a picture of you with your kids, like, hey, or are those your kids? And then you tell them about your kids, and you're like, oh, how about you? Do you have kids? And they're like, oh, yes, I do. And then they tell you that they're, uh, you know, 5 and 3, for example, right? And then automatically in your mind, you have a bias especially if
Oh, they're
they're a
gonna
female.
miss work a lot because their kids are gonna be out sick, or the other one too, on the flip side, is babies.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
because one is like, babies are like, you know, is that gonna require doctor's appointments and things, right? But then also how many kids you have and what ages they are, people start to think, oh, are they having more kids? Oh, now we got a maternity leave, especially if it's a woman
Yeah.
candidate, right?
I've had some female candidates that showed up to an interview with like a very like flowy dress because they were pregnant,
They were
right?
trying to hide it. I actually have a friend that did that exact same thing.
Yeah,
She was
and then and then
pregnant,
and
hiding it.
then they ended up getting the job, but they didn't reveal it. And then like 3 months later, they're like, "Oh, I'm like 6 months pregnant. I need maternity leave in 3 months, right?" And
Yeah,
they still got it,
yeah, yeah.
but then
I mean, a good employer is like, well, I guess we'll figure it out, but
yeah, but they were just more like they were a good employer, and they were more like, "Oh, it would have been nice to know ahead of time." So just for planning purposes, not so we
yeah,
can
yeah,
discriminate, right? But you hear about people getting discriminated on a lot, right? So then it resorts to situations like that where candidates kind of disguise it. From an ageism thing, I've seen candidates hide, like shorten their resume. For
yeah.
example,
With their
like
graduation date, a lot of people are taking their
yeah,
college graduation date off and leaving just like the university and their major and GPA and stuff because we've done it as recruiters, Yang. I know you and I have. We backtrack to figure out, not that we're doing it to discriminate, but like to figure out like what, like kind of where that candidate is, like in that age bracket, like by
so
their graduation date.
yeah, yeah, so I've done that because they don't list their whole resume out, right?
Yeah.
Because the general rule is that you see online is they say like 10 years history or whatever,
Yeah.
right? But what if they've been only at, it only shows 2 jobs, but then the latest job is like a controller or something, It's like so they
Yeah.
have to have more years of experience, and then I just wanna know the full story, right?
Yeah.
And then you see that they graduated in, I don't know, 99, for example, right? And then so then that's a question that I ask, like, "Oh, hey, what did you do before? What companies did you work at? Maybe you had
Right.
different industry experience, so on and so forth," right?
Right.
But those are some of the things that you can do. However, if you get asked, like in an interview, like, "How old are you?" Right? I just answer personally, right? But if you want to make it like you can say how is this relevant to it, right? But then there's the whole thing of like once you kind of makes the vibes just drop,
Yeah.
right? And from an
I
interviewer
mean,
standpoint, they
you
shouldn't
could
be asking you
reframe
that
it instead
question.
of saying like, "How is this relevant to my job?" You could just say like, "Well, why not?" You could turn it back on them, but in a like polite way of being like, "Well, what are you looking for? Or what would be ideal for this department? What would be ideal for this role?" And see if you can parse out something from the interviewer about like why they're asking that question, right? Then you could probably get a better read on, and you might hear interviewers say stuff like about it doesn't necessarily have to do with age. It could just be like, we think we're a hip culture. And you're like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that you like everyone that works here is young or you just want to be seen that way? Like, it's hard to read between the lines sometimes, I think, in interviews.
Yeah, yeah. So my general philosophy is like to screen people in versus screen people out, right? So yeah, so I tell people like know what your bias is, and then make sure that you're not unconsciously, acting on your bias. Right.
Right.
So like for example, like I've told you this before, but like I'm biased towards Asians, because I'm Asian, right? And then like in my mind, Asians work hard and we're smart, all those like
Yeah.
biases, right? So then when I see an Asian resume, I know that I have this bias, right? So
Like this
then,
person must be smart or
well, yeah,
whatever.
because because
Yeah.
because I have this positive
Yeah. But
bias
that's
towards,
not always the case. Yeah.
yeah, towards my fellow Asians, right? So what I do is I make sure I scrutinize it with a fair lens, right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so I know I have this bias, right?
Right.
So then I need to make sure that I'm looking at this resume fairly
Right.
instead of with a positive filter. And then,
Or even
people
if you
have,
pre-screen them, that you're asking, the same questions you would ask to other candidates,
yeah, exactly.
you ask the right behavioral questions to parse out their work ethic and things. If you already know you have the bias that it's there.
Exactly. Because the other thing that people do when they're interviewing is they hire people that are like them. you know? So, using my Asian experience, like example for is that, I like Asians, right? Like, because you're like me, oh, you look like my brother or whatever, right? And then I have a more positive feeling towards you,
Yeah.
right? So I
Just
have to make sure,
impulsively.
yeah, so I have to make sure I'm hiring the best qualified candidate, not just somebody that I like or that feels familiar or whatever.
Right.
So that's why you'll look at some organizations and then all the C-suite look the same.
Yeah. 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 That you get a lot. You can go to people's websites and you're like, oh yeah, I got
Yeah. But
um
and that's kind of what they do. But then from a business standpoint, the downside, and I'm not going to be all like DEI or whatever, right? But like I am about having different diversity of like ideas
mhm,
and upbringing, because they offer different types of insights, they offer different
yeah,
types of things that they can value that they can bring to the company
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
versus if you hire a bunch of people that are like you, that think like you, that agree with you, you're gonna have blind spots that
yeah,
you miss.
absolutely. Well, and I also think like, back to like if you're starting to get asked those kind of questions in an interview, I think again, we say this a lot, like go with your gut, but if you just feel like again, it's hard to tell whether that's the stance of the interviewer versus the company, right? Like, is that
Yeah.
really, is everyone is that the company culture to hire young people or not to hire older workers, because they're getting too close to retirement age or whatever? Or is that just that manager, right? So I think there's things you could probably do in the interview to like gauge that or even research you could do on the company and like the types of employees they're hiring. Do your homework because you could probably try to figure out whether this is like systemic or localized. And if it's localized, then of course, you're going to be most of the time, the interviewer is probably going to be your superior at some
Yeah.
level. And so, do you really want to work for that person? You're interviewing the company just as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah. So to answer the listener's question, if you're in an interview and you're getting asked like essentially any kind of inappropriate question, um, don't work there.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's a
probably
red
not.
flag. It's a
Yeah,
huge red flag.
it's probably not the right fit for you. I tell candidates all the time, I'm like, hey, just like they're interviewing you, you're interviewing them. You're going to be
Yeah.
spending most of your working day or your day at work, right? You wanna be somewhere that's positive,
And
that's not.
values you and ethical and all the things.
Exactly. So then if from your first impression in the interview, you're already getting asked this kind of stuff, like what do you think's gonna happen later on down the road, you
Yeah.
know?
I mean,
So
devil's advocate, right? I mean, I get it. I've been in the shoes of a candidate where everything on paper and everything about the job just looks amazing, right? The pay, the bonuses, the PTO, they'll let me work hybrid. Like it checks all these boxes for you, but then you're getting asked these kind of like strange questions. And let's just say that you do fall in the category that's on the positive side, right? Like maybe they're just asking questions to try to kind of gauge like your life situation or your age or whatever, but you know, you're actually like what they're looking for. Well, it may not affect you, but do you really want to work for somebody who would, parse out a candidate that didn't meet those like rigid requirements?
yeah. And it's hard to tell because it could just be a harmless question where they just
Yeah.
ask like, "Oh, how old are you?" Because they want to, relate. It's like, "Oh, I'm, 54. Oh, you're
Yeah.
56. Oh, great. Blah blah blah." Right? Like,
And I've never really been directly asked, like, my age, but I've been
yeah,
indirectly asked
yeah,
things that I feel like get them to try to gauge my age, especially nowadays, right? Like, I think people can look younger than it's not like we always do I use it as the Golden Girls reference. So,
mhm,
like, everybody's always like, the Golden Girls on that show were, like, supposed to be in their 50s, like, or even some of them were, like, in their late 50s, which is, like, not that much older than us, right? But, like, their clothing and their hairstyles and all of those kind of things, like, made them look older, I think, than they actually were. Whereas today, we're a little bit more like, women don't necessarily cut their hair short at 50, or whatever. So I think we're looking younger and it is harder to gauge. And so, but you can't judge a book by its cover, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, and then at the end of the day, age shouldn't matter, right? Experience matters, personality, culture, the culture fit, all the other normal stuff that you would interview for, that's what should matter,
right.
right? And if you get the vibe that they're trying to screen for your age, that's probably a red flag.
Yeah.
And you should take note of that, and then um probably go with the company that's, not going to discriminate like that.
I mean,
Yeah.
what's interesting is I think you and I being coming from years of recruiting, we used to see the age discrimination more on the older side. I used to, right?
Yeah.
Where like you would send an older candidate and then, the client would come back and say like, they just weren't the
Well, they
whatever it
say
was.
they're too heavy. Like they have too
Yeah.
much experience,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? It's like,
They
what do you
try
mean
to
too
find like a
much experience?
polite way to tell you they're too old.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you're seeing this. I feel like I'm seeing the flip side now
Yeah.
more where, as the boomers are starting to leave and it's more of our generation starting to be in those executive roles, they actually are usually a little bit more tolerant, understanding, whatever, of older workers because they value or appreciate that experience. I think who's getting more scrutinized now is those young ones. Like people coming right out of college, you're seeing they're struggling to get jobs because one, you know, automation, like you said, AI, but also just the experience level. I don't have
Hmm.
enough experience. I don't have enough experience. It's 3 to 5 years. I only have one. I only have two. I'm getting passed over every time.
Yeah.
And so like companies aren't as willing to like train that sort of,
Yeah.
like you got to
What
train greener people and they don't want to spend the time to do that.
I think it depends on the type of person too. So that whole concept of like job postings as minimum 2 to 5 years experience or whatever, right? Like that's kind of been around a problem since before. Because if you never get a chance to gain the experience, how are you ever going to have the experience? Like, because no job ever says 0 plus,
Yeah.
like it's
0 to
always like,
10. Yeah.
yeah, even the entry level is this entry level 2 plus, three
Yeah.
plus, right? I'm like,
That's not really entry level. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, right? So I remember having conversations with, people straight out of college. It's like, I cannot, I'm getting a bunch of interviews, or some of them were like not even getting interviews. So the worst was the candidates that didn't have a great GPA coming straight out of school. They didn't have any internships. And then, they graduated, let's say, with like a 2.9 or a 3.0, or, just kind of right at that borderline.
Basic average level. Yeah.
Yeah, and they didn't really have like a lot of internships or something like that. So then there's like with the big companies who are willing to train, they have a minimum GPA threshold, right? So a lot of the times, some of the more elite jobs, it's like 3.5.
Right.
But then even like some of the other ones, it's like 3.2. Some is 3.0. And if you're a 2.9, you'll automatically get screened
Yeah.
out. They don't even talk to you, right? And then it becomes more of like do you know somebody at the company to try to get it in? And but I remember, like, same thing for me, like getting that first job was really hard,
Yeah.
right? And
Well, and I also think GPA isn't always indicative. I would know we're going off on a tangent here, but GPA isn't always indicative of. I was an average student, pretty much
yeah.
like through high school and college, right? But I think, I mean, I consider myself to be, bright, but I also wasn't good at standardized testing. If it was like I just bombed those kind of things. And I also like struggled, and I still do as an adult sometimes with like prioritizing and procrastination and things like that. And so
Hmm.
I was always that study, like cram study person and take the test and see how I do. Like, oh God, But I was also working two jobs, like putting myself through school. Like, you don't know people's situations, right? But just because they were a B student doesn't mean they're not an A technical. Like, workplace is very different than school. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think, like, companies have to really shift their mindset on that as well.
Yeah. So what's the solution here? Like, if you're a, let's say, average or below average grade point graduate, you graduate, but you graduated with a bachelor's,
Mhm.
right? um what do you do? I can tell you what I did, but
Well,
yeah.
I hate to say this, but I would say lower your expectations, and by that, I mean, don't apply to Deloitte.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Well, you
you
can
look for
try. Yeah.
but look for those companies that are more willing to take a chance. Smaller, family owned, like, personality's a big deal for them instead of all the credentials, you kinda gotta look beyond the typical.
Yeah.
Sometimes that actually ends up working out so much better for you in the long run because you can climb the ladder quicker. You know, it's not the corporate structured environment that burns people out. Like, you know, go into those smaller companies. It might be a little bit less money in the beginning, but it
Mhm.
could have long-term upside for you, you know?
Yeah. Because you're saying, like, maybe from a pure, like, experience play, you'll gain more experience that you wouldn't have had, at a bigger company where you're kinda siloed in your department, for
Right.
example,
I mean,
right?
now HR even, right? Like, if you go to a corporate company, you don't get that generalist, like exposure anymore.
Mhm.
You're, like, doing benefits or onboarding or comp or what it's very, like you said, siloed. And so, like, I could have never gone into consulting had I not worked at smaller companies where I got to touch all of the different facets of HR. Because how
Yeah.
would I be able to consult companies then on all of the facets of HR, you know? So
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't stay in a corporate environment where I was just like a business partner or just, benefits or I'm glad I
Yeah.
got that real world experience.
Well, here's my advice for college students, right? So if you're in college now, let's say you're a sophomore, junior, and you're ahead of the curve, which I wasn't, like, yeah, like I was great in high school, and then in college, not so much, right? That's the story. That'll be another story
Story
time
for
for later.
another day. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, but yeah, so if you're in that early kind of college years, like, prepare, make sure your GPA is on point, make sure you're lining up internships for that summer, because the reason why that internship is valuable is for the networking, not
Mhm.
necessarily for the experience, because a lot of the
Sometimes you don't
interns,
even get valuable experience in internships.
yeah, you're not really doing any, like, super meaningful work per se.
You're like doing admin stuff.
Yeah, unless you get lucky and you get,
Oh,
like, a really good one. Yeah, that happens. But typically, it's more for the networking, right? And then networking with the right managers, that could be your future boss, right? Things like that. Because when the time comes, and then, assuming that you keep it up through your senior year, those companies that you had interned at are going to be your potential employers in the future, right?
yeah.
So if you're ahead of the curve, that would be my advice there. It's pretty, cut and dry in that sense. But if you're already, like, graduating and you're trying to line up something now and you have nothing, and
Probably just need to do an internship, to be honest, like,
well, but let's say, like, you
hope
can't
that
get an
it's
internship
paid.
because your grade points, below
Yeah,
average, for example,
yeah,
right? Then networking is going to be your superpower,
yeah.
right? At this point, you're going to have to just network your way in. You're going to have to go to all the career fairs, job fairs. You're going to have to hustle just three times as harder as the other person, because um, on
You
paper,
kinda missed that boat a little bit. I will say this
yeah,
too, I if you're still a student, lean heavily on your career centers. Colleges are doing a lot more than they used to prepare people for the real world. Like, I was really impressed. I went to a career fair at U of H recently with for one of my clients. I was there, like, we were recruiting for summer marketing interns, right? And I was really impressed at the resumes that these kids had put together. Sorry, kids, young professionals.
young adults,
Here we
yeah.
go, the ageism. Just kidding. Um, but then also, like, the questions they were asking us, like, I mean, obviously they were prepped, right? Like, but it was they were prepped well. Like, they were asking us very good questions, and then there was a lot of back and forth. It was almost like a on the spot interview, right? And I was pretty impressed at, like, the communication. Like, you could tell the ones that were nervous and stuff, but some were really confident. And I mean, we got a stack of resumes probably like this thick or whatever. And going through them, like, a lot of them looked really at that level. You're like, I don't know, they're all qualified. Like, they're all at the same level, basically.
Yeah.
So, you kind of just, okay, move to interviews and then it's more of a personality fit and culture
Yeah.
fit and things like that. But,
Uh,
but I was impressed. I lean on the career centers. They will help you, navigate you through some of the things you can do to prepare.
Another good networking angle is your professors, right? So I've personally had a few entry level jobs where I needed to hire people like out of like master's programs, for example,
Yeah.
right? And I have relationships with a couple professors like locally that refer me candidates.
Yeah.
And then they will say, "Hey, these two were some of my top students,
Right.
from when they took my class or whatever," right? So that right there is like a automatic, it's like a referral.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even if they have no experience, like just because this professor recommended you, in my eyes, you're at a much higher standing compared to the average entry level person,
Right.
right? Yeah, but it's just hard. That first job
I
is the
don't
hardest.
envy people trying
Yeah.
to enter the job market
Well,
right now.
I told you my story before where I knew nothing. I was so unprepared. I bombed my interview at the video game, my
Because
dream
who
job.
knows, like, what that job could have, like, looked like for you, like, had
Oh
you
yeah,
gotten the job.
yeah. I would be having a different life, right? I'd be making video games, right?
Be in
Uh,
California somewhere.
yeah. So yeah, that's the thing. It's like because of that experience, I realized like I had to learn how to interview, I had to learn how to network, like, but
Yeah.
it forced me to get out there and I really hustled and that's how I got my first job, right? Because
Yeah.
I like, because on paper, because once I became the manager of that branch, right? And I thought back, I would not have hired myself back then, you know, because on
Yeah.
paper I sucked, right?
Somebody took a
Like,
chance on you.
exactly. My first boss, like she just, she took a chance on me. But that's also because I was so like how
Determined.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, also, so
I
that was the same that was my first so my very first job was we talked about was Abercrombie, right?
yeah
So, this was my next the staffing company you and I both worked at was, like, my next like, that was my real first corporate job, and I
yeah
thought the same thing, like, they're probably like, "Abercrombie store manager, like, how's this girl gonna, like" how does that segue into, like, the staffing world? Other than, yes, I hired people,
dude.
like, for
But even
corporate.
that, you had a better resume than I did. I had like nothing. So the reason why I got that job is because I cold called selling myself to that company.
Right.
Yeah,
But I mean,
like
I was just, like, thinking, like, oh, like, retail management, like, but I felt kinda the same way, like, they took a chance on me,
oh yeah, for sure.
and they saw
Yeah.
something in my personality or whatever, so,
Yeah.
it's what led me to HR.
Well, my wife has a similar story too, where she was like in a motorcycle accident. She ended up dropping out, going back. Like, so she didn't have that pristine,
Like, a
like,
gap in
yeah, like she ended up getting her associates and, so she didn't have like that great looking resume or pedigree either, but she got a job at one of the best children's hospitals because
yeah,
she the same thing, like hounded them, right?
yeah,
And then really sold herself. And then they told her, "Oh yeah, come in for an interview." But then they're like, "Oh, sorry, the job got put on hold for 6 months." And she's like, "Okay, I'll wait." Right?
yeah,
Because for her, that was like her dream job, right? And then during that 6 months, she said, "It's like, hey, could I come and just shadow?
like,
Like, you
be
don't have to
like a
pay me.
volunteer.
Yeah, like I'll come out, whatever." And she did that, right? A couple times.
Well, then people
So then,
know her and they
and
see
then,
her and
yeah, she just has that work ethic, that drive. And so then when the job opened up 6 months, it got put off a hold. She was the first person they called.
yeah,
And then
that's
she's been
awesome.
there, yeah, and then she's been there since, right? And she's like one of their best employees, right? But still, like,
But
it's
that's
all
a good
about.
way to be, like, creative, think outside the box on how to get your foot in the door if you really have your mindset to, like, a
Well,
company.
the other thing I tell people is you have to think about your advantages, right? So when you're older, your advantage is experience,
Mhm.
right? So lean heavily on experience and then the value that you can bring to the company. And it's like, hey, this is just general interview advice that I give people. It's like, think about the ways that you can help the company, right? Like, so for
Right.
example, like I saved this company X amount of dollars by switching them payroll systems and I was able
Yeah.
to whatever. Or if you're like I don't know, like an AP person, it's like I audited all of the old pay and I found that we duplicated payments on, whatever, and I saved the company $50,000 or whatever in
Yeah.
duplicated payments, But
Statistics. Yeah. Like
yeah, 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 yeah.
know what
Some
you've
some
done.
sort of key accomplishments and this is what I can bring to your company, right? Because of my experience, right? But when you're young, you don't have that yet, right? But what you do have is energy, drive, hustle, work ethic. Like you can outwork other people. You can
Right.
outsmart other like,
Yeah.
you can just and then you can say, "Hey, this is the training that I got in college. Like I learned all these new softwares, like I'm up to date." So it's more about showing potential and drive and ambition. You have to lean on that because that's all you have.
Yeah. Technology is a big one too. Like right now, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, like, I feel like sometimes I used to feel like the real tech savvy one until like recently. And now I'm like falling behind, like, especially with
Oh,
AI.
yeah.
But when I hear these like younger, employees like teaching me things like I'm like that hurt. It's like the world has flipped. It's so crazy. But this one client that I have, they have like a social media manager and he sits like diagonal when I'm at their office. And so I like pick his brain and ask him questions and he will kind of show you or teach you things. And I'm like, there's so many things like I'm like, I don't even know what that is. What is that app? What does it do? Like, and so if you're an employer and those are the kind of things like I would be wanting, there's intrigue there, right? I'm like, I want to
Mhm.
hire this person just to see what they can like automate for my company. Yeah, come on. So like technology experience. So, doesn't even matter if the technology isn't immediately applicable to, they can learn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're like, "Okay, come on."
Well, it's kinda like what you told me about Notion, right,
Yeah.
for you? Yeah, but that's exactly how I felt like when I first started using AI too. I was like, just only like I was just using it like Google, like just asking it basic questions, right? And then you just kind of go down this rabbit hole and you're like, oh my God, there's so much other stuff you can
Yeah, I
do.
didn't
And then
find Notion on my own. That was from a younger employee who was, like, really more tech savvy,
Mhm.
doing their homework and beta testing things and, like, then teaching me about them, and I'm like, "Yeah, how much value there was in that for me?" Because
Mhm.
I, like, certainly wouldn't have even known where to start.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember you trying to explain that to me, and I'm like, okay, never mind, just stop.
Yeah. I'm like, "Let me do a demo for you, Yang. I'll show you sometime."
Yeah, you're like, hey, you should do this in your business, blah blah blah. And I'm like, it's okay.
Well, you already have, like, a laundry list this long of, like, stuff you're beta testing, so I'm like, "Just you got enough on your plate." As far as
Yeah, yeah. But that's why when we started today, I was just like brain dead.
yeah, because well, you can go down that, like, research rabbit hole too, where you're like you look up and
Yeah,
you're like, "Oh my god, I've been, like, researching ChatGPTing for, like, 2 hours or so," it's like, yeah, I couldn't
yeah,
get
yeah,
away with
yeah.
you.
All right. Anyways, so we'll move on. So we got one last question. You ready?
Yes.
All right. So final question. I have a coworker who is a high performer, very accurate, detail oriented, capable. The problem is that she is only pleasant to work with around 50% of the time. The other 50%, she is purposely difficult, easily irritated when things aren't done her way, and makes the job of those around her noticeably harder. Her attitude has gotten so bad that managers from other departments dread having to interact with her or make requests to her just to avoid conflict. And then when she's in a bad mood, everyone feels it. Can you share an example of how you have helped a manager navigate a situation involving a high performing employee with a toxic attitude?
Yeah. So attitude is always one where it's difficult, right? Even when we try to performance manage somebody, right? Because just like this is like the prime example of an employee who you can't really performance manage them because there's nothing wrong with the performance, right?
Mm.
They meet all their KPIs. They do a great job. They deliver. The company's happy about their work output, you know? So then, but the flip side of that is that's great for the company and that is great for like the immediate supervisors or whatever, right? Because they're like, I know I can rely on this person to like get the job done. But what it does create is if what she's saying is true or whoever the listener is, right? If what they're saying is true, first of all, I don't it does everybody like have share this, she says other managers, but I don't know if that's just stuff they've heard through the grapevine, right? But I also don't know if that's a perception thing or what. Like just like the other one, the example we were talking about earlier, right? Like, introversion or so toxic to one person or attitude to one person versus another. But let's just, for the sake of the listeners, question, assume that other people are experiencing this,
Mm-hmm.
right? It is kind of a widely known thing. So I think that there are some things that the manager can do to try to manage this situation without one accusing them of something or coming towards them in a negative way, but also that considers like, or takes the performance element of it off, the table. So for example, they could approach it like, your technical skills are great, you know, you always deliver, but there's been some concerns raised recently about your interactions with, some of your other coworkers or colleagues, these are some of the things. But instead of like them, there's that chance they could feel like, what? Because sometimes there's self awareness. People don't know things about themselves or how they're coming across. Like, so they could be completely floored by that. But as a manager, if you're finessed enough in this type of management, you could approach it like, hey, is there something going on that's just, distracting you? Like that's where you can try to, it doesn't always work, but you can try to get to the bottom of, hey, is there some extenuating thing that no one's considered that has basically driven this, them to be, maybe it's like they're extremely busy and so their responses are short and that comes off as, dismissive.
Mm.
Oh, I didn't mean to be. Oh, is that how I came across? So sometimes raising the awareness first and foremost will actually, you'll see a turn in behavior, right?
Yeah.
And then other times I think it's that, there may be an extenuating circumstance going on. But what you have to remember as a manager is that if you do nothing and you just say like, oh, well, she's my top performer, so I'm not going to even try to like, approach that because I don't want to lose her or him or her, then you're putting yourself in a situation that you could lose other employees.
Well, then you're kind of setting the tone of this is accepted,
Yeah.
and then other people can act like that, or it could get worse, or yeah, exactly. People are gonna leave.
Team morale, like if I'm an employee, I'm not going to stay on a team where I have to work with a difficult, I'm going to probably try to put in for a transfer or I'm going to like,
Yeah.
you know,
Okay, so
that's
I have a question.
the situation.
Earlier you had mentioned like their performance is good, meaning like their technical performance. Couldn't you add like or is personality not part of a performance review? Is that not
So
considered?
you have to be careful of that because it's
Yeah.
so subjective, right?
Yeah.
And I see it all the time. I actually see this is the two things like my biggest pet peeves are personality things on job description or job postings and on performance reviews, right? Because for instance, start with the job description one, right? Like if you say looking for somebody who is, those warm and fuzzy little things that people, that is not tangible. There's nothing that you could ask them or parse out in the interview that's going to tell you if they're that way or not.
If they're
And they also
bubbly or
give
yeah.
you the right answer. Of course, they're going to tell you what you want to hear. You're not going to know some of those things until you put that person in the job. And that's just the truth of it, right?
Mhm.
But same with a performance review. Now, there are like ways to nuance things about like communication. So you can absolutely have communication on a performance review. And if that person is having difficulty, like if they're getting complaints about the way that they communicate, you can give them a lower ranking score. And then that's a great time to approach it with them and say, well, I had to give you the, just in all these other categories, you're ranking fours and fives and whatever. But in this category, I had to score you lower because, people are, there is like these perceptions that your communication is, short or dismissive or whatever. And you can use those terms like that. You just have to be careful of using terms that like, are too subjective.
Yeah. So I have a friend. She manages a small team, and it's a very kind of a stressful type of team, right? And the job nature, right? And she has couple team employees that are good at their job technically, but because they're just so busy, just taking calls, whatever, they're just very short with people, right?
Yeah.
And they're just very direct, and their personalities are like they're that type
That's
too.
how they are. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not the warm and fuzzy types, right? They're not the bubbly, "How are you today?" How was your they'll call you and be like, "Hey, I need this, blah, blah, blah," right? So then
Hmm.
for the other person receiving it, even though their intent is not in a whatever way, they're just more like a get it done mood. Their
Yeah.
natural just kind of like bluntness comes out. The other person sometimes receives it the wrong way, and then they get a complaint,
Well, that's
right?
perception is reality, right? So
Yeah.
I think in those situations too, it might even be a situation where you have to, I mean, I hate the word or the term mediation because it sounds like so legal and like,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to feel like this formal mediation. Sometimes you just sit employees down with each other and you go, hey, employee A, here's the perception. Hey, employee B, did you know that that was the perception? And you kind of like go back and forth until everybody's like, oh my God. And you know what? In all my years of doing mediations, you know what usually comes out of it? Everybody ends up being like, oh my gosh, that's totally not how I was trying to be. And oh my gosh, I'm so sorry if I came across. I didn't realize that you were that busy. I mean, you come to some kind of mutual or neutral ground on it.
Mhm.
And everybody walks away with a better understanding. And now employee B knows how to interact with employee A. Employee A knows, hey, when I'm interacting with employee B, like maybe not be so sharp. Like there are ways to get on the same page.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
takes a strong manager or HR or both to like mediate that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Like you can't just be like, put two people in a room because then I've seen it go the flip side of that where they start getting combative with each other. And you're like, oh, this did not go the way that I wanted it to.
Yeah.
So you've got to keep the direction of that meeting positive.
Yeah, keep it productive.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. So yeah, that comes down to like earlier points that we had talked like in earlier episodes about training
Yeah.
and leadership training and just learning how to have difficult conversations, right? There's books called How to Have Difficult
Yeah.
Conversations, right? But it's a skill and you have to learn it as a leader. Like it's very important. But back to the listener question about the toxic coworker, really the best I'm assuming that the boss knows,
Yeah.
right?
If other
And
managers have like said they don't like interacting, there's no way that other manager probably hasn't told their manager like your employee is
yeah.
difficult,
So
you know?
so it's really up to that leader to address it. Because you as the peer, you can't really don't have the power or the authority to kind of really do much. I'm sure you can just kind of try to talk to them and be like, hey, but there's only so much you can do. So
Yeah.
in that situation, if your leader is not a strong leader or doesn't want to deal with a confrontation, so what do you do as the employee? You're just kind of stuck there?
Well, you can escalate it, but then your manager might see that as like you throwing them under the bus too. So you got to be careful about how you would do that. But I think that there are still ways you could navigate it. I mean, I think it starts with if the scenario is truly how they're saying it's not just within this is systemic, like this has bled outside of the immediate team and there are other external teams that are saying that or like like dreading talking to this individual. those managers too, like, should have a responsibility to bring that to the attention of the manager or to someone who can, like, I would take it to HR. If it were me, I would take it to HR and say, we're struggling in this area. And then HR, if they're good, would sit down and like mediate a situation. Hey, did you know that this is the perception?
Yeah.
Not accusing you of anything. Like, we think your work product is great, but we do need to find a way to like figure out how to collaborate because
Yeah.
you can't have other departments not want to interact. The interaction has to be there, you know?
And it becomes a productivity issue too, because then there's no collaboration between teams. Like work gets delayed if somebody doesn't want to come to you with something because they don't want
Mhm.
to work. Yeah, it's just a mess. And then back to my earlier point is, and then if none of that works, find a new job.
Yeah. I feel like that's always our solution if like
Yeah,
but it is the truth, right? There are companies where there's not strong managers and there's
yeah,
not strong HR, and that's unfortunate. I mean,
yeah,
like, and a
yeah,
lot of that is due to lack of training. It's a training issue,
yeah,
like
yeah,
100%. But sometimes there's nothing you can do to fix that. As an individual employee, like, there's nothing you can do. So, if
yeah.
you know that those issues exist and there's literally not gonna be any change, why stay?
Yeah. And that person, even though they're a top performer, they're not really a top performer because a top performer by definition is somebody
As a
that
leader?
yeah, and that makes everybody around them better too. Right?
Mhm.
It's kind of that basketball analogy, like you put a superstar on a team, they'll make everybody around them good. Right? They'll
Right.
and then that person's a superstar because when they leave, the team like, everybody else does bad, right?
Right.
That's the most valuable employee, right? That's a
Right.
top performer, not just somebody that's just executing and doing their own thing really good, but then that's making it miserable for everybody
Well,
else.
because
That's
that
not,
person's probably going to not progress in there. They're gonna stay lateral. They're not gonna move up because they can't lead teams, they can't encourage and motivate and, so they're gonna just sit there and crank out technical work for the rest of their life. Like,
well, and they'll become probably more cranky over time because they're getting overlooked for promotions. They're,
yeah,
performance reviews mid. Who knows, right?
yeah.
Anyways. All right. So that's all the questions that we have for today.
This
Did you
was a
have
good segment.
anything?
I mean, we got off topic on a few things, but I still think
Yeah.
it was valuable insight we talk a lot about the employer side of things. So I think this was really cool to like get to kind of give some advice on the employee side of
Yeah.
the table.
So listeners, yeah, submit more questions to us, and then we'll probably do another episode like this where we'll kind of collect them all and then answer them all in a batch. But obviously, if there's some urgent ones, we'll answer them in a timely manner. But if you like this format, let us know. We'll do more of these, and stay tuned for another episode next week.
All right.
All right,
Thanks, guys.
thanks, Ashley. Bye.
Bye.